Hello. So, astrology is often called the language of the stars, but it is also a story, one that has been told across millennia and many cultures. And when we look up at the stars, we see symbols of destiny. Among the 12 divisions of the sky, the 11th house has long held a unique promise, a promise of hope, support, rewards, and gain. So today, let's walk through time and tradition to understand how the 11th house was seen by ancient astrologers and what it brings. The 11th house is commonly called the house of friends, alliances, networks, wishes, and gains. But when we look at it through history, we see it as a symbol of our connection to social networks, spiritual allies, and cosmic forces. This house is also called the house of the good spirit, a place where fortune meets friendship and where our hopes find fertile ground. The Babylonians laid the foundation of what we now call astrology. And while their focus was more on omen-based astrology, they did develop a form of house division based on the rising sign. Now, the 11th house wasn't yet codified as the house of friends per se, but it was part of what they called the 12 places. Texts such as the Enuma Anu Enlil, in short, this is the Bible for the Babylonian sky priest, and this text mentions celestial omens connected to favor from gods and kings, something that was later connected to the 11th house. Now, gain or reward in Mesopotamian astrology was tied to divine approval, usually shown through planets in this area. In Babylon, the gods didn't just guide, they also rewarded, and rewards were seen in the sky, especially in the region later known as the 11th house. Now, the Greeks took the Babylonian star lore and gave it structure. They created the house system, dignities, and incorporated the mythology that paints astrology to this day. They systemized astrology in the Hellenistic period, and the 11th house was seen as the house of allies and patrons. Now, Dorotheus of Sidon, one of the great astrologers of the 1st century of Common Era, wrote, "The 11th is preferred even to the 5th, for it is the place of allies, patrons, and those who support us." In other words, the 11th house is about the people and forces that help us advance, so not just friends, but those with influence who can bring opportunities and protection. 11th house was thought to be strong in the diurnal charts. These are charts with the sun above the horizon. It is also a succedent house, so strong and supportive, and in sect doctrine it's favored during the day, especially for planets like Jupiter or the sun. In Hellenistic astrology, the Greeks gave it also a spiritual dimension, as the 11th house was called the house of the good daimon, or the agathos daimon, meaning good spirit. And this was no small title. The daimon represented a guiding spirit, a protective force that aided one's destiny. So this house was considered one of the most fortunate. If Jupiter is placed here, this would be interpreted as a great sign of fortune and support from influential people. To the Greeks, a well-placed planet in the 11th house could signify that a person's dreams weren't just possible, but also that they were supported by divine or social forces. And this idea persisted into the medieval period, with Arabic astrologers like Abu Mashar describing the 11th house as a place connected to angels or divine forces that support human endeavors. So the 11th house also has a mysterious, esoteric side. In medieval astrology, the 11th house was thought to be connected, like I just mentioned, to angels and spiritual intelligences, so forces behind the scenes that assist in one's ambitions. And this is reflected in the idea of secret societies or spiritual fraternities, so groups bonded not by casual acquaintance, but by shared higher purpose. And this spiritual dimension connects well with the idea of the good diamond from the Greeks, showing that the 11th house is about both worldly or mundane support and divine guidance. So it's not just about the friends one meets in everyday life, it's also about the invisible hands that guide and sustain one's journey. In the Islamic Golden Age and medieval Europe, astrology was a refined science based on Greek roots but expanded mathematically and philosophically. The 11th house is tied to hopes, wishes, gifts from superiors, and friendship. Astrologers like Al-Biruni and later William Lilly emphasized it as a house of rewards, networks, and patronage. They also associated with wealth through career, as it is the second house from the 10th, meaning the money of one's profession. In a king's chart, a strong 11th house meant loyal supporters. In a merchant's chart, it meant successful trade connections. And for a scholar, it pointed to influential patrons. One key to understanding the 11th house is its position relative to the 10th house, which is the house of career, reputation, and public standing. Now, because the 11th house is the second house from the 10th, it naturally relates to the wealth, rewards, and benefits that come from one's profession or public efforts. Navidius Valens, another Hellenistic astrologer, described it as the house of accomplishment and acquisition, so the fruits that come from one's social and professional activity. This means the 11th house can tell us where and how we might gain materially or socially through our career, but also through our networks and groups. It answers the question who and what helps achieve one's goals. Now, turning to the East, Vedic astrology also holds the 11th house in high regard. Known as the house of labha or gains, the 11th house shows what one earns through effort, especially through community and social networks. Now, the great Vedic sage Saravali talks about how different planets express their gain through this house, saying that the moon in the 11th house gives gain through women and elephants, Mars through fire or war, Mercury through harmony and youth. And this shows the agricultural and social realities of ancient India, where wealth was measured not only in coins, but in cattle, land, and community standing. Now, the 11th house also indicates long-term friendships and allies, emphasizing its social and collective nature. It is thought to be the most important house for material profits. It is seen as the culmination of effort, a result of karma and work done in other houses. It also represents older siblings, social circles, and fulfillment of kama, or desire. If benefics like Jupiter, Mercury, or Venus are placed here, one is likely to enjoy wealth, networks, and success. In Jyotish, the 11th house is where the fruits of one's karma are harvested, so it's not just luck, it's deserved gain. So Western tradition links 11th house to patronage and support from society. Vedic tradition ties it directly to personal effort and karmic result, and Babylonian thought is less specific but emphasizes divine reward in similar spatial areas. The 11th house is one of hope, not passive hope, but the kind that is met with support, allies, and material return. So no matter from which period or which system one uses, the message of this house is quite clear. The 11th house is where our desires align with destiny and where community helps us reach our dreams. Also, I have to mention here Thomas Aquinas, an Italian philosopher and theologian known as the Angelic Doctor from 13th century, who in his De Udicis Astrorum, this is Latin phrase meaning on the judgment of the stars, where he's citing Augustine, allowed astrology in natural realms but warned against attributing human actions to celestial determinism. Now, this restrained view helped medieval astrology maintain moral and theological legitimacy, even when interpreting houses like the 11th as houses of gain. And now let's look to the eternal or fixed stars that inspired ancient astrologers. Now, while the 11th house itself isn't directly tied to specific fixed stars, since houses are Earth relative and stars are sidereal, many fixed stars do have symbolic and functional relationship with themes of the 11th house, particularly those involving gain, success, allies, kings, patrons, hopes, ambitions, and public recognition. So here are some fixed stars that align most closely by meaning or influence with 11th house themes. So Regulus, the bright heart of Leo, is a star of royalty and honor. Ptolemy said, Regulus, when rising or culminating, gives glory and high rank. When connected to the 11th house, it suggests success through powerful allies and noble favor. Altair, in Aquarius' constellation of the Eagle, represents visionary ambition and leadership through collective effort. Beta Aquarii, or Sadal Sud, meaning luck of lux, is a lesser-known star associated with wealth and social favor, nicely echoing the 11th house promise of communal gain. Then Dene Balgedi, a Capricorn star, symbolizes guardianship and justice, so support earned by service and wise leadership. Fomalhaut, a royal star in Pisces and one of the brightest in the night sky, blesses the 11th house with idealistic hopes and spiritual alliances. And Spica, a star of blessing in Virgo and in Libra, brings grace, talent, and prosperity through refined networks and gifts. Now, Ptolemy also said the fixed stars are not to be interpreted in isolation, but in their rising, culminating, or angular context. So when a fixed star shines near one's 11th house or its ruler, it's like a celestial patron granting strength and favor to one's hopes. The Hellenistic astrologers did not use houses as fixed star domains. They examined angular relationships. So if a star was near the cusp of the 11th house, or the ruler of the 11th was conjunct a star, its effects would be felt in the house's sphere. Now, the 11th house is linked to Aquarius and is considered to be a masculine house. It rules over the legs, calves, and ankles, as well as friendships, children, stepchildren, and their hopes and desires. Its associated colors are saffron and deep yellow. Now, this house has a close connection with the 5th house, especially when it comes to children and fertility. Now, since these two houses are opposite and complementary, if the 5th house indicates challenges with having children, the presence of positive planets or the moon in the 11th house can suggest opportunities or support in that area. Now, health-wise, the 11th house relates to issues in the legs, including knees, ankles, and shin bones. So, for example, Neptune's influence might show up as swollen ankles, among other things. But planets placed in the 11th house tell us also a lot about the kinds of people we attract as allies and friends. So Saturn in the 11th house usually brings serious, loyal, and long-lasting friendships, though these may form slowly and come with challenges. Or these can be disappointing friendships. Now, Saturn here can also show loss related to children. Now, Venus in the 11th house attracts charming, generous, and artistic friends who support with kindness. Mars here can mean energetic, competitive, and sometimes challenging allies, but also passionate partners in ambition. Now, by understanding the planetary influence in this house, it helps to see what kind of tribe we gather on our journey. It also teaches about the dynamics of our social circles, whether they're supportive, confrontational, or nurturing. Now let's go one step further. What happens when the ruler of the ascendant, the planet that signifies an individual, a body, drive, and life path, is placed in the 11th house? It tells us how the core of a person, one's vitality and identity, aligns with one's ability to gain, to fulfill desires, and to connect with allies and benefactors. Now let's walk through this placement for each ascendant. For Aries ascendant, if Mars is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Aquarius. Now, with Mars in the 11th, the Aries individual is driven to pursue ambition through action in the social realm. These people are bold, even combative when it comes to getting what they want, especially within groups. Now, gains may come through competitive or political circles. Mars here is like a general among allies, so strategic, sometimes aggressive, but undeniably driven. Vedic view is that Mars in the 11th house is considered favorable for gain, especially through male allies or older brothers. For Taurus ascendant, if Venus is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Pisces. Now here, Venus is exalted. Now this is a classic placement for someone who gains through grace, charm, and artistry. Social alliances are not just pleasant, they're powerfully beneficial. Now this person attracts beauty, love, and wealth without much effort, and one's desires tend to manifest with surprising ease. Friends are usually loyal and artistic, and life can reward one through harmony and aesthetics. In Vedic astrology, Venus in the 11th house gives good associations, gains from women, creativity, and wealth. For Gemini ascendant, if Mercury is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Aries. Now, Mercury here is fiery and fast-talking. This individual uses wit, intellect, and communication skills to get ahead. Gains come through writing, speech, trade, or clever networking. There may be a sharp tongue, but also a persuasive one. These are people who think their way into opportunity. Now, Mercury in the 11th house indicates mental sharpness, which serves ambitions, and this can be useful in politics, teaching, or commerce. For Cancer ascendant, if Moon is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Taurus. So the Moon is exalted in Taurus, making this a deeply supportive position. Now this individual draws emotional fulfillment through friendships and may benefit through maternal figures or nurturing roles. Now public life is steady, prosperous, and emotionally rich. One understands what the world needs and usually delivers it. Now, Vedic astrology says that exalted moon in the 11th house indicates steady income, emotional security through gains, and public appeal. For Leo ascendant, if Sun is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Gemini. When the Sun, the Leo's very own soul or planet, is placed in this house, the person seeks recognition within the collective. One shines in groups. These people may be drawn to leadership roles in social causes or artistic circles. Their gains come when they are visible, expressive, and intellectually engaged. The Sun here says that purpose is fulfilled by uplifting others through one's voice. The Sun in the 11th house is a classic Raja Yoga indicator in Vedic astrology, which signifies gain through power and status. For Virgo ascendant, if Mercury is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Cancer. Now, Mercury in Cancer brings a thoughtful, emotionally intelligent communicator. This individual tends to serve others quietly through healing, teaching, or caregiving networks. Gains come from behind the scenes, possibly through women, family, or emotionally bonded alliances. These people build steady bridges, not flashy ones. But here, an afflicted Mercury may indicate a potential risk of anxiety, especially related to concerns about social status or friendships. For Libra ascendant, if Venus is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Leo. This is a magnetic placement. Venus in Leo gives a strong desire to shine in social settings. It wants to be admired, celebrated, and loved. This individual gains through charm and beauty, but also through performance, drama, and artistic expressions. One's friends are often glamorous, influential, or part of high society. Desire for glamorous network is prominent, so usually these people thrive in entertainment or elite social circles. For Scorpio ascendant, if Mars is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Virgo. Now, Mars in Virgo creates a strategic and analytical operator. This individual tends to gain through precision, detail, and systems. One may work quietly in service-oriented or technical fields, but can also be calculating about friendships, choosing allies based on utility. For these people, their ambition is focused and their gains are earned, but one may be overly critical or controlling in group contexts. For Sagittarius ascendant, if Jupiter is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Libra. Now, Jupiter in Libra suggests gains through fairness, justice, and social diplomacy. This person is supported by wise and balanced people who can be teachers, judges, or artists. The dreams of these people are high-minded, and their social circle can be refined. They pursue ideals, and the world usually rewards them for it. They gain through justice, education, and shared ideals. For Capricorn ascendant, if Saturn is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Scorpio. Now, Saturn in Scorpio is a serious placement. Here, the individual experiences delayed but lasting gains. One's networks are powerful but can be forged through adversity. These people learn hard lessons about trust. But if they persevere, they build connections with depth, loyalty, and long-term value. Here we see a risk of power struggles or losses through friends unless well aspected. The Saturn in the 11th house gives discipline in ambitions and ultimate gain with persistence. For Aquarius ascendant, if Saturn is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Sagittarius. Now, this person seeks gain through wisdom, philosophy, and structured belief systems. Saturn here is disciplined and goal-oriented. This individual may take time to find the right circle, but once that happens, one becomes a pillar of that group. Now, these people gain from long-term alliances, ethical leadership, and principal ambition, and one may have older, wiser friends, siblings, or mentors. For Pisces ascendant, if Jupiter is in the 11th house, it is in the sign of Capricorn. And this is a complex one because Jupiter is in its fall in Capricorn. So gains may come slowly or with effort. One may struggle to find the right supporters early in life or distrust their networks. But through discipline, humbleness, and service, these people can still achieve great growth. This is a path of delayed blessing, but blessing nonetheless. In Vedic astrology, debilitation can be cancelled if Jupiter is retrograde, in conjunction, or aspecting its own signs, so Sagittarius or Pisces. Now, when many planets are placed in the 11th house, this usually suggests atheism or a unique worldview. Now, Neptune in particular tends to cause the most challenges or confusion when it comes to making plans or creating strategies. The ruler of the 11th house shows the direction of our hopes and aspirations. It also points to where we may encounter disturbances, nuisances, but more importantly, where help can come from. Now, in astrological interpretations, the 11th house is also seen as the house of pension because it is the second house from the 10th house, which relates to career and status, so essentially the fruits of our labor. However, if the 11th house holds malefic or negative planets, or if planets form challenging aspects, this may indicate difficulties with pension or retirement benefits. So, for example, an afflicted Saturn here could mean delays or hardships in receiving the pension. If Uranus is afflicted, it might suggest legal issues that could deny the pension. Neptune's influence here can bring confusion in planning or uncertainty regarding the rewards of one's work. Now, one usually overlooked detail is that the 11th house is traditionally associated with Saturn's joy. And what does that mean? Well, Saturn represents delay, endurance, and slow but sure growth. And because of that, the 11th house's rewards can come slowly, but once they arrive, they tend to be stable and lasting. And this contrasts with the sudden, fleeting gains of the 5th or 2nd houses, for example. Now, the ancients admired this kind of gain, a treasure that matures with time, building a foundation for the future. So the 11th house is a place of hope, where our earthly, everyday efforts meet cosmic support. It is the house of the good spirit, the patrons and allies who lift us, and the stars that watch over our highest aspirations. Now, Dorotheus of Sidon summed it up by saying, "From the 11th, know the allies of a man and the success of his hopes." So as you study charts or reflect on your own life, take a closer look at the 11th house, as it is here that you'll find clues about who supports your dreams, what hopes are still waiting to be realized, and the cosmic forces that might be guiding your journey. Also, related to the 11th house, Aristotle once said, "Friendship is a single soul dwelling in two bodies." So may your friendships and alliances be a source of strength and joy, and may the stars continue to light your way. Thank you for joining me today as we uncovered some of the timeless wisdom of the 11th house. See you next week. Bye.